Cheers, cheers, cheers. I'm so happy.
So happy in China，
So happy in China
太高兴了，在中国，
to have lovely friends,
这么多
lovely
好朋友跟
food,
在一起，
nice conversation, blah, blah,
跟大家
blah.
交流。
A simple promise changed two lives forever. A young Chinese man brought his Swiss landlord from London to China, taking care of him in his old age without asking for a single penny in return. What kind of deep bond could make someone willing to care for a foreign elderly man even more carefully than a son would care for his own father? And what made this old man willing to leave the place he had called home for years to travel halfway around the world to China? This is a true story about promises, gratitude, and friendship that crosses all borders. A story that shows you the very best of human nature.
This is my bedroom. Very, very comfortable. Friend Song Yang,
Friend，
relative. My relative Song Yang.
Do you miss home？
This is home.
这就是家。
I'm very happy here. Very
他很高兴的在这儿。
yes.
Here's your home.
Huh?
That's home, yeah.
Yes.
With family.
Of course.
In the summer of 1999, 19-year-old Song Yang traveled alone to England to study. As a newcomer, the unfamiliar environment, language barriers, different living habits, and cultural differences felt overwhelming for the young man who was all by himself. On his third day in London, still unfamiliar with the local transportation, while waiting for a bus at the station, an elderly man walking slowly and carrying many shopping bags smiled and approached Song Yang, asking if he needed help. Seeing Song Yang's Asian face, the old man asked curiously, "Are you Korean or Japanese?" When he learned that Song Yang was Chinese, the old man became very excited and kept asking about China. The old man was very humorous and talkative, and Song Yang patiently responded to all his questions, sharing interesting stories about life in China. The old man warmly invited Song Yang to visit his home. Song Yang thought, since school had not started yet, and seeing the old man carrying so many things, why not help him take them home? The old man's home was located in West London by the Thames River, with the Royal Botanic Gardens across the water and picturesque scenery all around. Song Yang had assumed the old man must have a big family, but after entering, he discovered that the old man had been living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment of about 400 square feet. The room was quite dim, with spider webs everywhere and things scattered about in disarray. Through their conversation, Song Yang learned that the 66-year-old man was named Hans, and he was not British but Swiss. His mother had died when he was 3 years old, and he left home in his 20s, traveling to North Africa, the United States, Egypt, Israel, and other countries. He had worked as a car salesman, owned a bar, and loved adventure. In his youth, he would often charter planes with friends to explore Central Africa, pursuing freedom and refusing to be tied down. He never married and had no children. After settling in England, he worked as a secretary at the Royal Opera House until retiring in the early 1990s, after which his life became dull and meaningless. Hans did not take good care of himself, eating very simple meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Song Yang himself was living far from home without family nearby, and seeing this old man who had been drifting alone in a foreign land for so many years, he immediately felt deep sympathy. Song Yang cooked 2 dishes for Hans, and although the taste was not perfect, the old man ate with great relish. Hans knew that Song Yang was living far away, so he invited Song Yang to stay at his place, asking only that Song Yang cook meals and without requiring any rent. At that time, to save money, Song Yang was sharing a small room with other international students in East London, and the daily commute to school took a very long time. Hans's home was close to the school, and facing Britain's high cost of living, being able to stay at Hans's place for free was undoubtedly a blessing for someone who was unfamiliar with the area. Song Yang agreed to Hans's proposal, and so, 2 people with completely different backgrounds came to live together. Song Yang took care of the old man's daily meals and living needs, teaching him about Chinese culture, while Hans was responsible for teaching him English and helping him become familiar with London's environment. During his days in this foreign land, Song Yang felt deep warmth from Hans. Then in 2001, an accident happened that made Hans's place in his heart even more important. During one of his outings, Song Yang was unfortunately in a car accident and was rushed to the hospital. He was hit so badly that his face was covered in blood and he lost 3 teeth. When Hans learned about this, he was extremely worried and immediately rushed to the hospital to take care of him, not only paying all the medical expenses out of his own pocket, but also running around to find the best dentist. Hans even helped Song Yang fight a legal battle for 3 full years, until finally receiving compensation from the person responsible for the accident. The old man's wholehearted care and help during difficult times were deeply engraved in Song Yang's heart. He secretly made a decision that he would take care of Hans for the rest of his life. During their years together, the two took care of each other and supported one another, becoming like family. In 2007, Song Yang earned his master's degree and prepared to return to China. Before leaving, he asked neighbors to help take care of Hans, but after returning home, he still could not stop worrying. Hans also missed him tremendously, calling every day for 9 months, sometimes talking for more than an hour at a time. Due to the time difference, Hans would call in the middle of the night every time. For 9 months, Song Yang barely had a full night's sleep, but he never complained. Hans would often say, "Song, my washing machine is broken," or "Song, I want to come to China to find you." Thinking about Hans living alone and helplessly in London, Song Yang felt very uncomfortable. One time, a neighbor suddenly called to tell him that Hans had gone out and had not returned home by evening.
说他不回来，邻居给我打电话，说这夜里边邻居打过来电话，可能就是凌晨4点钟了，说这都8点9点了，汉斯还没回家的。我说你赶快去找找，我给中国给这儿给那个路线图给他写出来，传过去。他现场收到了，打印出来，就这么快速度出去找汉斯。后来到夜里11点，汉斯找到。哎呀，我说这不可思议。后来干嘛？说我说在咱们郑州指挥着外国人在外国找另外一个人。
It turned out that after Song Yang returned to China, Hans became very depressed and began drowning his sorrows in alcohol, often drinking until he was completely intoxicated. He would rather sit alone in the park in a daze than return to his cold and empty home. Soon the heavy drinking caused Hans's health to deteriorate rapidly, and he gradually became bedridden. Song Yang's friends quickly took him to the hospital for examination, and unexpectedly, Hans was diagnosed by doctors with avascular necrosis of the femoral head, requiring immediate hip replacement surgery. After learning this news, Song Yang was extremely anxious, feeling like his heart was being cut by a knife. Since he was not by Hans's side, no matter how worried he was, Song Yang could only pin his hopes on his friends in London. Although surgery could be done for free in Britain, it required advance booking. Hans had no one to take care of him and could not complete the preoperative examinations, and after surgery, he would need someone to care for him day and night for 6 months. After careful consideration, Song Yang made a bold decision. He would bring Hans to China for treatment. When his family learned of this idea, they were initially hesitant. After all, Hans was a foreigner, and they did not know whether treating him in China would create many unnecessary troubles and procedures. Moreover, Britain had free healthcare, while returning to China would mean bearing high medical costs. However, seeing Song Yang's insistence, his family ultimately chose to support him. They firmly believed that even small kindnesses should be repaid with great gratitude. And so, at Song Yang's invitation, in June 2008, Hans traveled thousands of miles to China. When they reunited after several months, seeing Hans, who had lost more than 20 pounds in such a short time, Song Yang could not help but cry with heartache, and in his guilt, he held Hans and cried for a full 30 minutes. The whole family gave Hans a warm welcome. Since the family was living on the 4th floor at that time without an elevator, everyone took turns helping Hans, who had limited mobility, go up and down the stairs. In January 2009, with the help of friends, Song Yang contacted the best orthopedic hospital in Zhengzhou, arranged for Hans to have hip replacement surgery, and covered all the surgical costs. During the surgery, Hans suddenly experienced massive bleeding, and it was only through the combined efforts of the doctors that his life was saved. Throughout the operation, Song Yang stayed by Hans's side, carefully watching over him. Under the dedicated care and round-the-clock attention of the entire family, 2 months later, Hans finally regained his health. To celebrate Hans's discharge from the hospital, the family specially prepared an incredibly lavish feast of Chinese cuisine. During his stay in the hospital, Hans deeply felt the selfless acceptance and care from this Chinese family. This was the first time in his decades of lonely living that he had experienced the warmth of a family, and the old man could not help but cover his face and cry with emotion.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
After Hans recovered his health, Song Yang's family faced a new choice, whether Hans should stay or go. After all, returning to Britain meant he could enjoy free healthcare and transportation benefits for life, while staying in China would mean facing various complicated procedures. However, Hans expressed that he wanted to stay in China, saying, "I have no family in Britain, they are all in China. Our relatives and friends are all here." In fact, in Hans's heart, Song Yang's family had long become his relatives, and Song Yang could not bear to let the old man return to a lonely and helpless life again. And so, Hans settled down peacefully in this home, and the entire family treated him as one of their own. To make it convenient for Hans to go up and down stairs, Song Yang specially took out a loan to buy an apartment with an elevator, and gave Hans the largest room. Afraid that Hans might get bored, Song Yang bought a big television, downloaded many English movies, and bought thick stacks of English newspapers. In order to communicate simply with Hans, Song Yang's family members even learned some basic English phrases. When Song Yang was not home, Hans would go to the community area to exercise, and almost everyone in the neighborhood knew this quiet and kind foreign elderly man. Although Hans could not understand Chinese, he would always respond with a smile. During his free time from work, Song Yang would also take Hans shopping and buy him clothes. Wearing the new clothes Song Yang bought for him, Hans would dance with joy like a child. Later, Hans witnessed Song Yang falling in love and getting married, and even after Song Yang had a partner, he still tried to bring Hans along wherever he went. His wife also loved this adorable foreign old man and was deeply moved by the friendship between him and her husband. Being a nurse by profession, his wife would often give Hans medical checkups and shared with her husband the responsibility of caring for him. After their child was born, Hans was extremely happy and took care of the baby as carefully as a real grandfather would. In the blink of an eye, Hans had been living in China for 5 years, and at 79 years old, he had completely integrated into this big family and had fallen deeply in love with this Chinese land. In 2013, Hans passed away peacefully on Chinese soil due to heart failure at the age of 80. Song Yang's family was deeply saddened, and they held a funeral for him in the Chinese way, according to the old man's wishes before his death. Although Hans had left them, we can believe that in his final years, he was filled with nothing but happy and beautiful memories. 13 years earlier, Hans had warmed the heart of Song Yang, a young Chinese man in a foreign land, and 13 years later, this grateful and loyal Chinese young man had in turn warmed the heart of Hans, a lonely and helpless old man. Their mutual redemption and warmth toward each other is deeply touching and also shows us the purest trust and kindness that can exist between people.